Once again, the portal has opened, and in fact, the estimable Ponder Stibbins has worked out a method by which it is possible to leave the portal open. He has assured me that he has put in a failsafe which will cause it to immediately close if any creatures from the dungeon dimensions or other unauthorized users attempt to move through it. So thank you very much, Mr. Stibbins, for that. This is episode 7 of season 10. We'll do 7, 8, and 9 here in September, and then the final episode, episode 10, will come along on the first day of October. Season 11 will start immediately the following week, October the 8th. I'm going to stick with doing regular episodes on the first, second, and third Fridays of each month instead of taking breaks between seasons as I was doing. I also need to tell you that we do have a new email address. It is medievalgnome, all one word, at Gmail, and that is spelled MEDIEVALGNOME. Again, MEDIEVALGNOME. I'm going to be transitioning all of our Medieval Gnome Productions messages, including emails from you, the listener, to that new address over the coming weeks. Reminders about this season's contests. The Rename That Show contest ends on the 20th of September. The last episode of September, regular episode, is the 18th, but previously I had said the 20th would be when the contests would end, and so they shall. So you still have 16 days to send me your brilliant or off-the-wall idea for a new name for the show. And don't forget the poetry contest. Seems like everybody has, except one listener. I have one person who has sent in 2 haikus. And so at this point, I think she's a pretty good bet to win the custom episode. But perhaps she will get some competition. Perhaps I will get a few more entries in the next 16 days. And I also need to remind you that the person who gets the nod for the best idea for the Rename That Show contest gets a copy of that beautiful new book, the Ankh-Morpork Archives, Volume 1. I got them in the other day, and it's just a beautiful thing. It's obviously has no new content from Sir Terry. I don't think the Department of Postmortem Communications had anything to do with the production of this book, but it is being called Volume 1 of a Discworld Anthology, and it includes stuff which Sir Terry wrote about the things that are included. Boy, that was really awkward, wasn't it? It includes material that Sir Terry wrote about the specific subjects in the Ankh-Morpork Archives. But it also includes quite a bit from Stephen Briggs and a lot of wonderful illustrations from Paul Kidby, who, of course, did many of the book jackets. And the way they organized this, the way they set it up, was to create 4 sections in the Ankh-Morpork Archives. And those 4 sections concern Unseen University, the Assassin's Guild, the Post Office, and the Thieves Guild. And they are all just a whole lot of fun. And the last couple of programming notes for today. First of all, the regular episodes and the Pratt Chips episodes from the previous week are going to be posted on our YouTube channel. You can get the URL from that in the show notes. We're going to post those every Saturday for the week's previous shows. So if you want to catch up that way, you can do that. And it is rumored that there might be some extras in there. There may be some appearances by the staff and other goodies. But those are just rumors. Also, if you support the show in any manner, and there are several ways to do it, you will get as a thank you, in addition to whatever else you may be getting, depending on how you support us, early access to the Pratt Chips for the coming week. Just a little perk there. Say thank you again for your support of Medieval Gnome Productions. But now back to the portal and the portal, because I told you about the portal in terms of it being continually open now. And I'm taking advantage of that fact by taking some trips in there through the week, doing a little research, as it were. I have paid my premium with the Thieves Guild, so I don't have to worry about that. I'm not going anywhere near the shades. I am, or plan to, visit some Ankh-Morpork landmarks, but I have spent my time this past couple of weeks in the Mended Drum. I've made some visits to the Mended Drum and heard some very interesting things in there. I always take a bunch of bananas along with me and a bag of peanuts in case the librarian is in while I'm in there. And the other day he was, and we chatted over a banana, and he told me about an incident concerning the Extreme Sneezying Society, which Lord Vetinari has said he thinks the people in it are frankly insane, and it sounds like they may be. Moist von Lifvig toyed with the society when Odora Bell Deerheart was out of town before they were married. He no longer attends meetings. They meet once a week in the drum. There are no secret signs, no rituals. They're just a group that welcomes anybody who is crazy enough to try the world of extreme sneezing, and it's exactly what it sounds like. The idea is to bring a substance which will induce sneezing and have everybody try it, and the person who has the most extreme response, does the most extreme sneezing, then receives the traveling trophy of the society, the golden hanky. I was somewhat surprised to learn from the librarian, as he said, ook, 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 eek, ook, ook, eek, ook, which I am learning orangutan, and translated says, yes, the senior wrangler is a member of the Extreme Sneezing Society. And the librarian told me about a particular incident that took place at a meeting of the society. The senior wrangler, for whatever reason, and it's hard to imagine why he would have done this unless perhaps Ridcully told him to do it, and what it was to bring the Bursar to a meeting of these extreme sneezers. Ridcully may have said, help him get him out of himself, which of course is what Ridcully tries to do by shooting crossbow bolts across the hall into the wall above the Bursar's head. This visit by the Bursar was not a big success, although it did provide some tremendously good entertainment for everybody who was in the drum, not only the members of the society, but the general public. As I said, members bring their own substance to snort, snuff, sniff, whatever you want to call it, every week, and usually it's black pepper. Black pepper is an old standby. There are members who get creative sometimes and try some other things, but on this particular occasion, the senior wrangler not only brought the Bursar along, but his sniffing, sneezing substance for that meeting was ground, dried wahuni. The wahuni, of course, is the largest and worst smelling fruit or vegetable. Nobody's really sure which because most people don't care to get close enough to it to find out, on the disc. And you may recall that Ankh-Morpork's nickname is the Big Wahuni because it is the biggest, smelliest city. Anyway, the ground wahuni was what was brought, and as a new member, or at least a guest, prospective member, the Bursar was invited to partake of the wahuni, the ground wahuni, first. And having done so, he sat for a moment, and his eyes crossed. His face became very red, and he gave a sneeze, which was powerful enough to propel him out of his seat backwards across the drum. About halfway across, he turned into a ping pong ball. Very large ping pong ball, but nevertheless. Immediately, a number of the patrons of the drum decided that it would be fun to play ping pong with him, of course. And it was with some difficulty that the senior wrangler and the other members of the society retrieved the Bursar from those patrons. And apparently, well, first of all, the meeting broke up for the evening, but apparently the senior wrangler was contemplating a spell to try to turn the Bursar back, and then he realized that perhaps there was something better than that, because he had brought along some dried frog pills as a precaution, as you do whenever you go out with the Bursar. And the difficulty that the senior wrangler had was trying to find the mouth on the ping pong ball in order to give the ping pong ball version of the Bursar a couple of dried frog pills, but he was finally able to do so. He absolutely refuses to explain how, but he gave the dried frog pills to the large ping pong ball, and when I say large, apparently the diameter of this ping pong ball was about 5 feet. But he managed to get the dried frog pills inside the ping pong ball, and in only a few moments, they had the desired effect, and the Bursar returned to his normal shape. That's the good news. The bad news, unfortunately, is that he then proceeded to have a sneezing fit for the ages, and if the other members had still been there, they wouldn't have considered that to be bad news at all. But it was severe enough that it continued as the senior wrangler and the Bursar made their way back to Unseen University, and it was necessary for the senior faculty to convene an emergency faculty meeting and figure out how to help the Bursar to stop this sneezing fit. The librarian was very tight-lipped about how they accomplished that, of course, but they did, and according to the librarian, the Bursar is back to his old self, but when he is in need of dried frog pills now, he frequently hallucinates that his bedroom is full of ping pong balls bouncing on his bed. And of course, he used to hallucinate that there were naked young women bouncing on his bed, and he says that all in all, he would much rather have them back instead of the ping pong balls. I also heard a rumor from Duncan that the Thieves Guild is contemplating a strike, or they were, because as more and more people move into Ankh-Morpork, prices are going up, and the rates that the guild has been allowed to charge for their various services has remained the same for a number of years, and they were considering striking in order to get those rates increased. They were saying that it's becoming impossible for a thief to make an honest living in Ankh-Morpork, and Mr. Bogus, the president of the Thieves Guild, is rumored to have gone and seen Lord Vetinari and explained to the patrician that the guild was contemplating a strike if they were not allowed to raise those rates. Vetinari apparently asked Bogus what that strike would entail, and it would have entailed the individual thieves in the guild ignoring the current structure for theft, burglary, and the like, and proceeding to do as much of it as they felt they needed to do in order to make that living, to make ends meet. And Lord Vetinari is supposedly told Bogus that they were free to do that. He wanted to remind Bogus, however, that he took a very dim view of anything that threatened the city, and that he would make sure that he had the Scorpion Pit cleaned out, and that Bogus and the other leaders of the Thieves Guild would be suspended in it, head down, as soon as any strike began. Not surprisingly, there has been no more talk about a strike, I guess, but there was a small increase across the board allowed in the various rates that the Thieves Guild charges, and apparently they were happy enough with that to keep them from rocking the proverbial boat. Duncan also told me about all of the jobs that he had done recently, all of the crimes, the thefts and burglaries that he had committed. And he also passed on a sad bit of news. Apparently, the Duckman of the canting crew, apparently the Duckman's duck died. And he was deeply depressed and upset about this. The other members of the crew were not really able to cheer him up very much. Foul old Ron brought him a pigeon to replace his duck. We'll never know whether or not the Duckman would have been willing to become the Pigeon Man, because foul old Ron put the pigeon underneath his coat and brought it back to their camp under the bridge, and of course the pigeon was quite dead from the foul old Ron fumes before Ron actually got it there. But it is the thought that counts, and apparently this cheered the Duckman up considerably. And of course, it's curious that he had this response, this reaction, because whenever he was asked about the duck on his head, he used to say, "What duck?" So apparently he did realize that there was a duck up there, but he just didn't want to talk about it. And I'll let you know if I hear anything about whether or not he gets another duck or what indeed he ends up doing. I also stayed a little while to watch them rehearsing for that evening's tavern brawl, although I did not stay for the brawl itself, having been informed that the drum took no responsibility for the safety and well-being of patrons who were watching the brawl and not supposedly participating in it, which makes sense, I suppose, because they are choreographed these days, but they do get a little enthusiastic, shall we say, sometimes. And on my way back to Unseen University, which is where the portal comes out in the Disc world, I was accosted by CMOT Dibbler. It's the first time I'd actually met him. I did not buy anything from him, but I did tell him that he was actually famous in other worlds, not just on the disc, for his sausages in a bun and his business expertise in general. And he was quite flattered by that, but he would much rather have had me buy one of his sausages in a bun. But I wasn't feeling particularly suicidal at the moment, so I did not do that. I did pass an iconography shop on the way back, and I did go in to see what was going on with that, because it was not an iconographers. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. Shop. They weren't advertising to take pictures of your wedding or graduation portraits or whatever of that ilk. They were selling iconographs. They had an amazing selection of iconographs to choose from, and I went ahead and splurged. I spent $5 Ankh-Morpork dollars on a small model, just curious as to whether or not it would work here on the round world. But when I got it home and tried it out, I didn't get a picture out of it, so I opened the back to see what was going on. Maybe the imp had evaporated, I thought. And he was actually still there, but he was sitting there with his arms folded across his chest and a very nasty scowl on his face. And I asked him what was up, and he said that his contract did not include working in worlds other than the disc, and he wasn't going to take any pictures. He wasn't going to paint any pictures until he was taken back to the disc. And so I said, thank you very much, and I took him back to the disc. And I decided not to take the iconograph back to the shop, but instead I gave it to the first street urchin that came up to beg from me. And his response was, wow, thanks, Gov. I ought to be able to flog this for a couple of bob. So I hope he was able to. But there you have it, my latest trip to the portal and the Mended Drum. And now, as I mentioned, the portal now comes out in Unseen University. You may be wondering whether you can use it on your own, and unfortunately you will not be able to do so. The portal will not recognize you as an authorized user unless you support Medieval Gnome Productions in some fashion. And I'm not going to be taking you through the portal anymore as a group for shows, because it was brought to my attention that I don't have any liability insurance for anybody if something happens to them on the disc. But the good news is that henceforth you will be able to listen to the show in the comfort of your own home or office or vehicle. And I won't have to worry about getting sued should some horrible accident befall you, gods forbid, while you're on the disc. And I want to remind you again, poetry contest, September 20th deadline. Rename that show contest, September 20th deadline. The winner will be announced on the 10th show of Season 10, October 1st, and any and all pieces of poetry that I receive, which at this point, as I said, is 2 haikus, will be read on the September 10th show. I hope to get more entries because I would love to be able to read more of your efforts at haikus, limericks, or free verse, whatever kind of poetry you want to do, relating to the disc or Sir Terry or the show or Medieval Gnome Productions. Go for it. Keep going for it on those random acts of kindness too. Thank you for listening. Keep reading that Pratchett. Be safe, stay sane, and mind how you go. The Portal is a Medieval Gnome production. Remember, you can support the work of Medieval Gnome Productions by sending a PayPal donation to randy@mindkindle.net or by visiting the Medieval Gnome Productions Patreon page.